So I want to do this video for all you DMs out there who've been weighing in on fudging dice rolls and things like that. I've seen people say stuff along the lines of, well, what if you don't do the encounter correctly or whatever? First of all, there's no doing an encounter correctly, whether it's a module or whatever. You're not bound by the books for stat blocks. You're not bound by the books for anything if that's how you feel. Now, I will say this. I personally do not care if a DM in my game does fudge dice rolls. But I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to hear that you pulled punches. It takes it out. It ruins the game for me. It just does. And talking to other players, it ruins it for them too. I have played D&D specifically for 14 years, but I've been playing tabletop RPGs for about 27, 28 years. I used to fudge dice rolls. I used to be really bad about it. I used to think in this combat encounter, I want this specific feel, like I want it to be really tense and hard. And maybe this other one over here, I want the players to just stomp through it. And so I would go into a game trying to craft the tone of the game I wanted because I thought, oh, this will make it more fun for players. And I truly thought that, and I thought it would make it more fun for me. I went as bad as sometimes even making sure, even if I rolled low, oh, yep, the creature hit your armor class 20 character. I used to do that. Last time I did something like that, we're talking about probably 9-10 years ago at this point. When I stopped doing that, I noticed it made the game far more fun for me. I also noticed my players had a lot more fun. So that, and it was trying to manage fudging dice rolls, because part of fudging dice rolls, I think you have to have an idea of how many hit points your players have, and you need to know much more about each player character from a stat, viewpoint. And that is extra work for you as the DM. That's the other aspect of it. So I don't care what's on my players' character sheets. I really don't. And that has also been very freeing. I've been surprised sometimes when I hit them and they go, oh, I'm dropped. Like, that's surprised me at times. The other aspect is, as I've DM'd, I've learned other tricks that make it so I don't ever have to fudge dice rolls. For example, death doesn't have to be final. When you're talking about a game like Dungeons and Dragons, the character can drop to 0 hit points and be dead, right? But there's resurrection magic. There's the idea that if that player does not want their character to be dead, then you can craft a story out of that and retrieve that character from that plane, from the undead plane. You can do things like that to bring them back. They can make a pact with a warlock. I've had players that didn't want their character to die agree to make a pact with a warlock. In my Kobolds of Avernus campaign, one of my players made a pact with Tiamat. So Tiamat was their patron as a warlock. Some of these things. Now, this adds to the story. It makes it really fun. Was that an option in the Tyranny of Dragons campaign, or Descent into Avernus campaign? No, it was not. It's just something we did. And again, in all these instances, it's been far more interesting and more fun. If you want to fudge dice rolls, go for it. The one piece of advice I have for you is don't ever let your players know. So when you make content saying it's okay to fudge your dice rolls, you're basically telling your players you fudge dice rolls, right? And I think that ruins the experience for a player. That removes any lethality. It removes tension from the game. Now, with that said, there are sometimes players who really get upset by their characters dying. Maybe they've never had a character die, things like that. I will say, as a player, I used to also be like that, where I didn't want my characters to die. And so I used to make sure that I could handle a lot of different situations. And again, some of the better experiences I've had were my character dying. It was like so much better for the story. And I was then able to make a new character that fit the tone of the game better, that fit the campaign in general, fit the group better. Or it was just a character that I had been eager to play at that time. Because some of these campaigns can span multiple years. And so, not that you get bored with a character, but at some point you get ideas for new characters. And so playing that other new character you wanted to play is really, really fun, and you're not going to get a chance to play it unless your other character dies. So there are a lot of good aspects about character death that can help a campaign, that make it more fun. I do think there's a little bit of a, and maybe this doesn't apply to everybody, and most of these comments aren't going to apply to everybody, but there is something that I have noticed. There are certain DMs that I've played with who will fudge dice rolls, and they're making the assumption that it's more fun for players at their table if their characters don't die or suffer grievous wounds or whatever. And to me, that is almost egotistical. It's like, well, I know what's best for my players. No, you don't always know what's best for your players. In hindsight, maybe, and things like that, certain instances can be better. But I believe that, again, letting the dice lay where they are is most of the time better. There are occasions where it might not be. And again, you can take this with a grain of salt, or you can listen to me, someone who's run games for hundreds, if not thousands, of different groups. I used to do one-shots 4 days a week. I was running multiple campaigns. I have run, and if you go to my other channel on the Red app, you will see I have tons of games, tons of different systems, tons of groups. A lot of repeat players, not all repeat players, whether schedules or whether I even invited them to new campaigns or whatever. So the body of work is out there. Am I the best DM? I'm not going to say I am. I know I'm not. I know there are a lot better DMs out there. But I do believe this aspect of my DMing, I've got down. I think it's pretty good. When characters die, I do reach out to the player and say, hey, were you attached to this character? Is it something you want to... And I say this in session 0. The only thing I say in session 0 is the dice lie where they lie. Character death does not have to be final. We can talk about it if it happens. And I've found this works pretty much across the board. I saw a video a little bit ago that made me do this, even though I've been watching a lot of these videos lately. And the DM said the way around this is to tell your players that you will use your own stat blocks for monsters. You don't just use stat blocks out of the monster manual. I do that anyway. I don't even tell players. They don't need to know. And occasionally I'll tell them, like, hey, just so you know, this is not out of the book, after the fact, right? But my players usually know that ahead of time. I don't usually run monsters specifically straight out of the book. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I also make up monsters sometimes. And the other thing is I don't tell them necessarily that it's a bearded devil or a goblin. Sometimes I will just describe what it looks like, pointy teeth and, pointy ears. It's about 3 feet tall, razor sharp nail, like stuff like that. But I won't necessarily tell them it's a goblin or it's a kobold or it's a whatever, So, and I think that also makes it better. But players know not to just make assumptions in my games, and that works best. And I'm willing to work with my players. I give my players a lot of agency in different things. Even sometimes when they walk into a tavern, I will ask a player, hey, what's it look like? What is the unique trait of this tavern? Because I like to also be surprised sometimes as a DM. Part of the reason I like the dice falling and as they are is because I like to be surprised. I don't want to know what's going to happen. That's not how I prep. I prep how the world's reacting, especially in homebrew. When I'm running a module, I'm really bad at that. But when I run homebrew, I love to be surprised. I love to let the players change the world, and I like to just go with it. And I think it's made my campaigns a lot better. Again, take this for what it is. If you want to use this advice, your choice. Doesn't matter to me if you fudge dice rolls at your table or not. Just don't ever let your players know. That's the trick. Don't make it obvious. Once they know, the cat's out of the bag. It usually leads to some unhappy players. And the problem is, most players won't tell you that they're unhappy. Most players will not say they had a bad experience. They will just bite their tongue a few times, and then eventually they just stop showing or say they can't make it, and they fizzle out. I've experienced that as a player and seen other people quit out of groups, and I knew why. So, because they'll tell other players that they're not having fun, but they don't want to upset the DM and hurt their feelings. Again, just my 2 cents.